A couple weeks ago, I noticed in my wife's IRA, which I'm responsible for, I had about 40% in cash. I needed to look for some long-term stock plays. And like a lot of you, I'm responsible for managing accounts that are restricted from using options. So for example, in my wife's IRA, I can only go long stocks. A long-only stock portfolio can use various strategies, and one of those strategies is to invest in value stocks. And you may have heard of a guy, his name is George Gammon, and he has a large YouTube channel, and he talks about finance, the Federal Reserve, currency, macro investing, and just investing in general. And when George's channel started growing, he decided to share his way of investing. And one of the ways he likes to invest is in stocks, and he likes to buy stocks that are considered value stocks. He likes to buy things when they are cheap, and he's willing to hold for years until the investments pay off. Part of George's channel is also to interview macro value investors. And one of the investors he interviewed and eventually joined forces with is a value investor named McIntosh. Chris has an extensive experience in finding venture capital opportunities. He focuses on finding deep value stock opportunities all around the world. He usually finds stocks that nobody is talking about, the ones that aren't very popular right now. And a lot of the stocks he recommends, they used to be popular, but they've fallen out of favor, and he believes that they will become popular again. Now, I watched George interview Chris around a year ago, before they joined forces, and I remember Chris making some interesting recommendations. One of the recommendations was offshore oil tankers, and that was based on the premise that oil was in oversupply and will eventually need to be stored offshore. Chris recommended buying offshore oil tanker companies, and after a couple months, his recommendation turned out to be spot on. He also recommended to buy an ETF called KOL, which represented the coal industry. And I actually bought the ETF and made excellent money in a relatively short period of time. He mentioned a few other ideas that also panned out to be profitable, and I took notice. I also remembered that Chris and George teamed up to form a service where I could see recommendations from Chris. George Gammon and McIntosh have a joint venture called Rebel Capitalist Pro. And you can sign up for a trial for just $1 and you get 7 days, and then it's $57 a month after that. I went ahead and signed up for the $1 trial to see if I could find any stocks to add to my wife's IRA. After signing up, I noticed that Chris's reports were all archived, and I could look back and see what Chris recommended in the past. Now, the newsletter started back in March of 2020, and the format is set out in a way that Chris recommends about 5 stocks on a weekly basis. So every week he'll recommend 5 different stocks. Now, McIntosh is not from the US, and he looks around the world for deep discounted stocks. If you trade with one of the most common brokers in the US, like TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, Fidelity, etc., then you will be limited to the stocks that are recommended on the US exchanges. So if you want to trade on exchanges around the world, you can use interactive brokers, and there may be other brokers. I'm not sure, I haven't done the research. But unfortunately, my wife's IRA is with Fidelity, and I am limited to the stocks that are on US exchanges. So going through Chris's recommendations, I limited my research to stocks that are on the US exchanges only. And I decided to build a spreadsheet with this track record of US stocks since March 2020. And I typically don't like to go long stocks because they become correlated in a down market or in a crash. However, if you are buying them when they're cheap, then they don't have far to fall in a crash market. And since I'm forced to go long only, I think this is a good way to invest. Chris started dispensing his reports on the Rebel Capitalist Pro with George Gammon on March 7th, 2020. I looked over all the reports from March 7th, 2020. I looked through 41 PDF reports in total. Each one averaged around 25 pages each. I looked at every recommendation and filtered out the non-US exchanged stocks. And I would say approximately 40 to 50% were US-based stocks that were recommended. I ended with 78 stocks that were recommended over that time period since March. I took each stock's recommended starting price and compared it to today's price. And for reference, today is February 20th, 2021. Now I blurred out the actual stocks on the spreadsheet in this video in order to protect the possible proprietary information. But here's the spreadsheet results. Okay, so here's the spreadsheet here. You can see how many days ago let's just take this one for example. He recommended this trade on the 18th of March 2020. The price was $5.67 and today's price is $8.36. It's up 47%. This is the annualized return here, 50. And so you can see these are the 78 stocks that recommended. He actually recommended Bitcoin when it was around 7,000. We know what happened to that. So you can see here, these are all of the stocks and the annualized return. And obviously you're not going to invest in every single one, but if you want to diversify your portfolio and you are looking for a certain stock in a certain sector, this is a good place to find it. So you can see here. Now, cumulatively, you can see that's 88% return, but that's not really significant. But here, this is the annualized return of, if you were to go with every one of his picks, you would have made a 200% return annualized, which is really good. Very small amount of losers here. Like, see, most of these are all winners. When you look at the real percentage return, oh, look at this one. This is the only one I found right here. It was down significantly. There's one down, but I mean, most of them are up really nice. So I think that his picks are excellent. I mean, in terms of just finding that deep value and holding, and it doesn't even look like you need to hold very long here, because these are all under 1 year of maturity. Starting in March 2020 at the market lows definitely needs to be taken into consideration here. The impressive bull run definitely added to the returns that Chris got. But taking that into account, I still think Chris McIntosh has an impressive track record. And I'm definitely looking at his recommendations when I look for stocks to go long in my wife's IRA. If you're looking to build a long-only portfolio over a longer term, I recommend this service. And I will add this service to my short list of recommended services.